Motherfuckers be making up excuses off of how they already feeling. If you already feeling like that, that's it, how you feeling. Like, stop making that, oh, I'm going through something, or that don't got nothing to do with me. If you fuck with me or you don't. Simple as that. Everybody in life going through something. Is y'all cool? It's 2025. This shit ain't sweet. You gotta work for this shit. You gotta grind for this shit. What you know about grinding her at the same time, bitch? Oh, okay. And I'm still me. I don't wanna hear none of that.
Kierra McGee, also known as Key, died here Sunday. Now friends are remembering her, how they loved her, and they want her killer found.
She gonna tell you, I love you. Every time she see you, she gonna embrace you and let you feel her energy so that you know it's real. She was living life in full blast. Like, she lived her life as people would have wanted to, out loud. Out loud.
Bodies don't lie, but silence does. Somewhere in that parking lot, on the northwest corner of Independence Avenue and Van Brunt Boulevard, dozens of people watched Kierra McGee die. Not 2 or 3, not a handful. Police say as many as a few dozen people were standing right there when the gunfire started. And as of this moment, not one of them has come forward with the name investigators need. Before we go further, I need 30 seconds of your time. This channel exists because people like Kierra deserve to be remembered as more than a headline. Every case we cover on Mystora Crimes is a real person, a real family still living through this. If this video moves you even a little, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and like this video. It costs you nothing, but it tells families like hers that their story matters, that someone out there is still paying attention. Now let's get into it. Kierra McGee went by Key, not a nickname that just stuck by accident. She built it herself. Key to the City was how she opened her social media videos, over and over, until it became her identity. She was 35 years old, and by the time she died, she built a following of more than 20,000 people online. Her father can describe her in 4 words that tell you everything: go-getter, self-promoter, music entertainer. He said if there was anything positive to chase, she was chasing it.
Self-promoter, music, entertain, anything you want to do, she's doing it. Like, anything toward the positive side, she was everything for it. She was alive.
That word, self-promoter, matters here, and not in a negative way. In today's world, especially for young black creators trying to build something from nothing, self-promotion is survival. It's hustle. Kierra was out there putting herself in front of people, building a brand, building a name, in a city that doesn't always make room for that kind of ambition. And it worked. Her reach went further than her family ever realized while she was alive. Her mother, Belinda Ayers, said something that stuck with a lot of people who followed this story. She said, "I didn't realize how much this city loves my daughter." After Kierra died, Belinda started getting calls from all over Las Vegas, Detroit, St. Louis, New York. People she'd never met, people who only knew her daughter through a screen, reaching out because Kierra had touched something in them. That's not a small thing. That a woman who was actually connecting with strangers in a real, meaningful way, even if her own mother didn't fully grasp the scale of it until it was too late. Now here's where it gets harder to sit with. Before anyone official confirmed anything, Kierra's friends were the ones who realized something was wrong. They tried to reach her on FaceTime. She wasn't responding. And according to her mother, those friends were frantic, staring at a screen, watching her, not understanding yet why she wouldn't wake up. Imagine being on the other end of that call. Imagine not knowing, in that moment, whether you're watching someone unconscious or watching someone who is already gone. That's the emotional core of this case before we even get to the crime scene itself. A woman who was known, who was loved, who had just started to understand her own impact. Gone in the middle of the night, in a parking lot, with dozens of witnesses who have stayed silent ever since. Let's talk about what actually happened, because the details here raise more questions than they answer. It was early Sunday morning, August 2nd. Somewhere around 3:30 to 4 a.m., gunfire broke out in the parking lot of an O'Reilly Auto Parts store in Kansas City's historic Northeast neighborhood. Now here's something strange. A Jackson County Sheriff's deputy just happened to be nearby, not dispatched, just close enough to hear the shots. That deputy got there before anyone else, before other officers, before EMS, and it still wasn't enough. Kierra was found unresponsive right there in the lot. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her mother said something that has haunted a lot of people following this case. She said when she arrived, she never saw an ambulance the entire time she was there. Not that it didn't come, but that in the chaos and grief of that morning, an ambulance was never something she witnessed. Whether that's about timing, about how the scene was managed, or simply about a mother in shock losing track of what was happening around her, we don't know. But it's the kind of detail that sits wrong in your chest and doesn't leave. Here's the part that should unsettle you the most. Police believe there were as many as a few dozen people in that parking lot when the shooting happened. Think about that number. Not two people arguing in an empty lot at 4 a.m. dozens. A gathering, which means dozens of potential witnesses. Dozens of people who could have seen a face, heard a name, noticed which direction someone ran. And yet, in the aftermath, investigators publicly said they still needed to hear from anyone who saw or heard something. That's not a small ask in a case like this. That's detectives telling the public. Essentially, we know people were there, and we know they haven't talked. Why would that many people go silent after watching a woman die? There are a few possibilities, and I want to be careful here, because none of these are confirmed. This is pattern recognition, not accusation. In cities dealing with high rates of gun violence, silence after a shooting is disturbingly common. Sometimes it's fear of retaliation. People worry that talking police makes them a target next. Sometimes it's distrust of law enforcement itself, a belief that cooperating won't lead to justice, only risk. And sometimes, uncomfortably, it's because people in that crowd know exactly who did it and have reasons of their own for staying quiet. KCPD's own numbers give us context for how normalized this kind of violence has become in Kansas City. Officials have said that arguments are the leading cause behind the city's homicides this year. 37 out of 75 total killings tied to disputes that escalated into gunfire. 75 homicides in 1 year, in one city. Kierra's death isn't an isolated tragedy. It's part of a pattern city officials are actively trying to interrupt. Let's talk about where this happened, because that intersection has a history of its own. Independence Avenue and Van Brunt Boulevard isn't a random corner. KCPD's own crime map flags it as a documented hotspot for homicides, assaults, and robberies in a historic Northeast neighborhood. This isn't the first time gunfire has torn through that stretch of road, and it likely won't be the last unless something changes. In fact, that same general corridor has seen violence before. Just down the street, at a gas station near that intersection, two men, Nicholas Lewis's cousin, also carrying the surname McGee, Reginald McGee, were killed in a double homicide. No relation to Kierra has been reported. It appears to be a tragic coincidence of a shared last name in a neighborhood where loss keeps repeating itself. Their families later held a balloon release at the site, marking 1 year since their deaths, still without full closure. Tressa Lewis, who lost both her son and her nephew that day, called it senseless. That word keeps surfacing in this neighborhood story, again and again, tied to different names, different families, the same handful of blocks. Historic Northeast wasn't always known this way. Decades ago, Independence Avenue was lined with grand mansions, a wealthy enclave in Kansas City's early history. Over time, economic decline hollowed the area out, and with that decline came addiction, poverty, and crime that settled in and never fully left. Today, organizations like the Mattie Road Center, the Ad Hoc Group Against Crime, and Combat have set up shop directly along this corridor, running violent prevention programs, addiction recovery services, and community outreach, trying to pull the neighborhood back from its reputation. There's real investment happening, too. University expansion, redevelopment projects, affordable housing. A community trying, visibly, to rebuild itself. But progress and violence are living side by side here. And that's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath Kierra's case. She didn't die in some isolated freak incident. She died in a location authorities have already identified, on paper, as a place where this kind of thing keeps happening. Which raises a harder question than who pulled the trigger that night. Why does this specific stretch of road keep claiming lives year after year, despite the people actively working to stop it? I don't think there's a single answer to that. It's economics. It's proximity to easy access points. It's decades of disinvestment that don't undo themselves just because a few new programs move in. It's also, painfully, human behavior, arguments that spiral, conflicts that get settled with guns instead of words, because that's become the pattern in certain pockets of certain cities. KCPD has said it themselves. Arguments, not premeditated crime, are driving the majority of homicides in Kansas City this year, which means, more often than we like to admit, ordinary conflict is what's killing people, not criminal masterminds, not calculated hits, just anger, alcohol, adrenaline, and a gun that was too easy to reach for. Kierra McGee was standing in a parking lot that Kansas City police already knew was dangerous, surrounded by dozens of people, when someone made a choice that can't be undone. And whether that choice came from an old grudge, a sudden argument, or something else entirely, we may not know until someone in that crowd finally decides to talk. In fact, KCPD spokesperson Christy Temple made a public statement afterward that was almost startling in its directness. She said, and I'm paraphrasing closely here, that suspects in the city's recent homicides need to turn themselves in, and that police know who they are. She gave a 24-hour window. Whether that message was aimed specifically at whoever was involved in Kierra's case, or at the broader wave of violence the city was experiencing that week, isn't entirely clear, but it tells you how urgent and how frustrated investigators have become. So here's where we're left. A woman with a growing platform, a family only beginning to understand her reach, a parking lot full of witnesses, and total silence where answers should be. No suspect named, no arrest confirmed, just an active investigation and a family waiting. I want you to sit with something for a moment. Kierra McGee spent her life trying to be seen, building an audience, opening every video with Key to the City, making sure people knew her name. And in the final moment of her life, she was surrounded by more people than most of us will ever have around us. Dozens of them. And still, somehow, she died without anyone stepping forward to say what they saw. What does it take to make a crowd go silent like that? Is it fear? Loyalty to someone in that group? Or is it something more disturbing? A numbness that comes from living somewhere violence like this happens too often to be shocking anymore? And what about her mother, standing at that scene, searching for an ambulance she never saw? What does that tell us about how chaotic, how disorienting the aftermath of violence really is for people left behind, long after the headlines move on? I don't have answers for you tonight. Neither does the Kansas City Police Department. Not yet. What I have is a woman named Kierra McGee, known as Key, who built something real out of nothing, and a case that is still wide open. If you have any theories, if something about this story sits with you the way it sat with me, I want to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe stories like Kierra's deserve to be told with care and told honestly, subscribe to Mystora Crimes. Hit that bell so you don't miss when this case gets an update, because somebody out there knows what happened in that parking lot. And one day, we hope, they'll finally decide to talk.